In March 2022, one of America's top universities got caught faking its internal data for the U.S. News and World Report college rankings. The source? Not a journalist, not a regulator, just one professor, a quiet whistleblower, sitting inside the very university he exposed. What he uncovered would shatter the school's reputation and reveal how the college ranking system was built to be gamed from the start. Today, you and I must trace the loop before the college ranking system rigs you or rigs you again. So buckle up and make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. So, why do college rankings matter this much? Why would a university risk its reputation just to look a few spots higher on a list? Because in this business, ranking isn't just a number. It's a signal, a brand, and more importantly, it's money. Let's break it down. First off, rankings drive demand. The higher your rank, the more students apply. Not necessarily because you're better, but because you're supposed to be better if you rank that high. And that's what colleges count on. You see, more applications mean they can reject more students. The key point is not on accepting, but on rejecting students, which lowers the acceptance rate, which makes them look even more selective, which boosts their ranking again. It's a perfect loop, and they know it. But here's where it gets deeper. Rankings don't just attract students. They attract donors. They attract media coverage. They attract grants, research money, and government contracts. The rank on that list affects how many international students want to come, how many corporations want to partner, even how many professors apply for jobs. And here's something most people don't know. Some university presidents, they literally get financial bonuses tied to ranking increases, like a corporate CEO watching the stock price, because that's what this is now. It's not a school, it's a brand with a valuation. And if you think it stops there, it doesn't. When a college wants to build a new stadium or dorm or research lab, they don't just pay in cash, they borrow, just like a business. They issue bonds, which are rated by credit agencies. And guess what affects their credit rating? Prestige, yield rates, selectivity, institutional stability. In other words, their ranking. So a top 10 school, they get lower interest rates, more favorable loan terms, millions in savings, just for having a shiny badge. Now ask yourself this, if you were running a university, would you pour money into teaching? Or would you optimize your numbers? Because in this game, education isn't the goal. The ranking is. Education is merely a byproduct. So, what happens when ranking becomes the goal? You optimize for it, you game it. And if no one's really watching, well, you can always fake it. Let's go back to that school we mentioned earlier, the one that dropped from number 2 to number 18. That was Columbia University. What took it down wasn't a lawsuit or a government investigation. It was one man, Michael Thaddeus, a math professor who couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. He certainly knows numbers, literally. He started comparing internal data with what the university submitted to US News. The numbers didn't match. Class sizes were reported as smaller than they really were. The number of full-time faculty, inflated, SAT scores, cherry-picked, graduation rates, massaged. It just bent everything they could to stay number 2 strategically. And for years, it worked. Because here's how the system really works. US News doesn't investigate. They don't audit. They don't verify the numbers. They just kindly ask the universities to submit their own data. Think about that. It literally means colleges are allowed to grade themselves on a test that determines how much money they get. And if you're wondering why no one stopped this, here's the truth. Everyone knew. And let's be honest, you don't just need courage to be a whistleblower. You need to be ready to sacrifice it all, especially in a system where truth gets you punished and silence gets you promoted. Besides, it's not like other colleges were honest. Who is gonna report whom? Ironically, Columbia University tried it. They rigged the data, got caught, and then suddenly they didn't like the ranking system anymore. So what did they do? They boycotted it. They said, "We're not participating this year." Funny, right? Not when they were ranked number 2, not when the manipulated numbers worked in their favor. But once the whistle got blown, once the rank dropped to number 18, now they had a moral problem with the rankings. And when your survival depends on your spot in the rankings, they couldn't stay out for long. They rejoined the game, quietly, like nothing happened. Columbia just happened to get caught, but they weren't the only ones doing it. George Washington University, Temple University, University of Oklahoma, all exposed for manipulating the same kinds of data. Enrollment rates, test scores, faculty numbers, even student evaluations. And those are just the schools that made the headlines. Based on our research, there are numerous colleges that were doing the same thing. And unfortunately, some of them just happened to get caught. Most others? Maybe they just got better at hiding it or smarter at doing it without leaving fingerprints. Because when you build a system that rewards the image of success, not the substance, you don't get better education. Students don't get better classrooms. They get better looking brochures. But what if the numbers you trust the most, the ones printed in every brochure, are also a lie? After years of gaming the system, you'd think colleges were running out of tricks, but then they pulled off something brilliant, something that looked inclusive, progressive, fair. It is called test optional. Sounds great, right? No more penalizing students for one bad day, no more bias, but here's what they don't tell you. Test optional doesn't mean test scores are completely ignored. It just means they get to choose what counts. Let's say a student scores really high on the SAT, 1450, 1500, maybe even more. Of course, they'll submit the score. It makes them look good, and it makes the school's average go up. But if another student scores low, no worries, just don't send it. And now, the college gets to report a higher average SAT score without having to reject a single person. It's legal, it's clean, and it's genius. What do you think? You see, the real move wasn't removing the test, it was making the test selectively visible. Only show what helps, hide what doesn't. No one's lying, they're just being honest. Some schools even list test optional on the front page, while still factoring in test scores when calculating scholarships, aid, or admissions chances, because they still want the high scores. They just don't want the low ones dragging them down. And just like that, colleges found a way to polish their stats, improve their rankings, and look inclusive while doing it. Next comes acceptance rates. You've probably heard this before. This school has a 5% acceptance rate. It sounds impressive. Elite, exclusive. But here's the question nobody asks. 5% of what? See, the trick isn't being selective, it's looking selective. And that's where the yield rate game begins. When colleges realized that ranking formulas reward selectivity, they stopped optimizing for education and started optimizing for volume. So they flooded the market with brochures, emails, application fee waivers, not because they wanted to admit you, but because they needed to reject you. The more students apply, the more students they can turn down. The lower their acceptance rate, the higher their prestige. That's the game, and it goes deeper. Enter early decision. Sounds like a fast track, right? But here's the catch. It locks students in before they can compare offers or financial aid, and it boosts the school's yield rate, the percentage of admitted students who actually enroll. And they say they're doing it for students. But is it really? This isn't admissions, it's inventory management. They're not doing all these for students. They're doing so that they can maximize their yield like it's a business metric. That's why some schools even reject overqualified applicants. Because they're afraid those students will get in elsewhere and hurt the yield rate by turning them down. That's not selectivity, that's selective risk management. And the worst part? It works. The lower the acceptance rate, the more news headlines, the more applications next year, and the cycle keeps repeating. So by now we must know this. Getting rejected doesn't mean you weren't good enough, because behind the scene, they never planned to accept you in the first place. You were never part of the equation, just part of the strategy. In this game, rejection isn't a decision. It's marketing, branding, and strategy. However, let's not be too negative and say you do get in. You beat the odds. You become one of the chosen few. Congrats. Positive is good, and I don't want to ruin your moment, but what if getting in was just another part of the show? That's why it's time to talk about what comes after the acceptance letter. It's never ending, huh? You open your acceptance letter, the dream came true, you're going to college, and then you visit campus. There's a lazy river, a rock climbing wall, a gourmet dining hall with sushi and gluten-free vegan options, a dorm that looks like a 4-star hotel, and a student center with an actual Starbucks inside. Welcome to the arms race. Not for education, but for aesthetic prestige and branded experiences, built for the brochure, engineered for Instagram. And it's not by accident, because the same students who were bombarded with emails and fake selectivity now need to be sold on choosing this campus over another. So colleges invest massively in this experience. The gym, the dorms, the TikTok tour, not because it improves learning, but because it improves yield. Better vibe equals better conversion. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, professors are being laid off, class sizes are getting bigger, adjuncts are paid less than your RA, and many students graduate having never had a single full-time faculty member because the budget didn't go to teaching. They didn't upgrade the education, instead they upgraded the image. So now the question isn't how do we learn better, it's how do they profit more? And once you follow the money, you'll realize college isn't an education system anymore. When it comes to college rankings, we've already talked about applications, yield rates, donor prestige, but that's not the full picture. There's another reason, a bigger reason, one most people never see because it doesn't show up in the brochures. And no surprise, it's not about education, it's about leverage. Most elite universities don't just collect tuition, they issue debt. They borrow billions by selling bonds on Wall Street. They operate like businesses, and in some cases, they are hedge funds with dorms. Here's how it works. A university wants to build a new science center, or a luxury dorm, or a stadium named after a donor. They don't pay with tuition. They issue a bond, just like a company would. And to get the best deal on that, they need a strong credit rating. And what determines that credit rating? Not graduation rates, not faculty quality, not student learning outcomes. No, it comes down to one thing, perception, the brand. That's where the rankings come in. A high-ranking school looks stable to investors. A top-tier brand feels low risk. A 5% acceptance rate signals irreplaceable prestige. That's what the credit agencies reward. Harvard's endowment is, according to their annual report, now over $50 billion. It's more than the GDP of 120 plus countries. New York University has spent over $1 billion on real estate expansion, turning entire blocks of New York into its campus. USC manages its $8 billion endowment through a financial model so aggressive, Bloomberg says it resembles a private equity firm, calling it financial empire. And these aren't outliers, they're the model in academic empire. So the next time you see a school spending millions on marketing, remember this. They're not selling education, they're protecting the brand. Because if the rankings drop, so does investor confidence. So does their credit rating, so does their ability to borrow, build, expand, even survive. This isn't a side effect of the system. This is the system. Now guess who is footing the bill? Every year, tuition goes up. Every year, they say it's necessary because of inflation, of facility upgrades, of technology costs. That's what they tell you. But here's what they don't say. It's not just about cost, it's about who they want to keep and who they're willing to lose. Of course, they'll protect the business, the institution, even if it means sacrificing students. After all, the fancy campus is all for the students, right? Let's look at the numbers. In the last 40 years, college tuition in the US has increased by 1,200%. For comparison, the Consumer Price Index has gone up just 228% in the last 40 years. It's nothing but extraction. So, where is all that money going? Not to professors, not to classrooms, not to research. In fact, faculty salaries have barely moved. Over the past 40 years, real wages for full-time professors have increased by only 9.5%. Yeah, in the past 40 years. And for public institutions, a mere 3.1%, even as students are paying 12 times more. So, for sure, the money is not going to education. Meanwhile, non-teaching staff exploded. Deans, vice presidents, diversity officers, branding executives. The administrative class grew. So did their salaries. And you're the one paying for it. Now add to that a funding collapse. Over the past 30 years, state funding for public colleges has steadily declined. So what did universities do? They raised tuition and told students, don't worry, you can borrow. Oh well, it's not like we have an option. So we did. Now, over 44 million Americans hold $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. The average payoff time is 20 years. That's not a degree, that's a financial sentence. Even in a pandemic, when libraries were closed, gyms off limits, and classes remote, most universities didn't cut tuition. Some even raised it. It's ironic, isn't it? They told us college was the way out. For millions, it became the trap. She did everything right. He believed in the promise. They trusted the system. And now, this is what we got. $100,000 in debt. No job security, a diploma that feels more like a bill. Because in this system, the student isn't the focus. The student is the revenue stream. The donors get the buildings, the presidents get the bonuses, the school gets the bonds, and the student gets the debt and a branded piece of paper to prove it. They told us education was the path, but they built a toll road. One where your ambition doesn't matter unless you can afford the fee. We still pretend education is the product, but in today's system, education is just the byproduct. You are watching Academic Empire, and this is the dirty secret of colleges.